Lance Stephenson is one of the most entertaining, intriguing, and antagonising players in the entire NBA. From incredible over-dribbling sequences to blowing in LeBron James's ear, Lance has constantly found ways to make headlines in the NBA. But whenever Stephenson has ventured outside of the Indiana Pacers, he has struggled to find consistency and to provide value in the NBA. The presence of Larry Bird and the home, comfortable life that Lance enjoys in Indiana seems to ground him both on and off the court. This video will explore Lance Stephenson's history, from the courts of New York to the up and downs of his time in the NBA, and try and discern what makes this goofy shooting guard one of the most entertaining players in the league today. Lance grew up in Brooklyn, New York, a city famous for never sleeping, its deep love of basketball, and a streetball culture that rivaled the rest of the world. His father, Lance Sr., helped push Lance towards basketball stardom. He would run up and down Coney Island beach steps and play his dad one-on-one from an incredibly early age. It is hard to tell how much of this competitiveness and drive came naturally from Lance Jr. and how much came from his dad, but it is reflected now in his incredibly competitive personality and nature within the NBA. And it continued when he began playing more organised basketball as well. Lance always played up in his age group, with many stories of his skill at a young age circulating to this day. He once dropped 20 points as a 4th grader against 8th graders and challenged high school phenom OJ Mayo to a game of one-on-one when he was 3 years younger than him. And then, when he was 10, he challenged Sebastian Telfair, a 15-year-old New York legend, and whilst playing him, his dad hollered that his son was more ready for the spotlight now than Sebastian. There was even more foreshadowing from Lance Sr., as Telfair would struggle to ever really make an impact in the NBA, and Lance Stephenson would go on to be famous for making waves in the playoffs. All of these feats led to a courtside announcer nicknaming Lance Born Ready, saying that he'd seen him go up against seasoned NBA veterans, seasoned college cats, high school kids 2 or 3 years older than he was, and he was always repping. So he just called it. Lance was born ready. And when he wasn't talking trash and pestering the older kids on the courts of New York City, Lance Stephenson was also becoming one of the greatest high school basketball players in New York history. He would attend Lincoln High School and immediately eclipse nearly all of Sebastian Telfair's school records and achievements. In his 4 years there, Lance would win 4 straight championships for the first time in state history and take over Telfair's record for most points in the state of New York during high school basketball. Lance's only college season would be quite forgettable, and some drama surrounded him in the form of dropped assault charges, school suspensions, and a minor sexual assault misdemeanor. And with this history surrounding Lance Stephenson, it seemed odd that the Indiana Pacers and Larry Bird would take Lance in the draft. Ever since Malice in the Palace, Larry and the Pacers had done their best to strip away anyone with cultural problems that could potentially pose issues in the locker room and for the franchise. But Larry himself said that in 2010, it might have been time to begin taking smaller risks for guys who had the talent and whose personalities and cultural issues could be worked out. And he personally believed that Stephenson was worth the risk, and that together they could work through it to ensure that Lance had a successful NBA career. Larry Bird would take Lance with the 40th pick in the 2010 NBA draft, just one pick after his hometown New York Knicks took Landry Fields. Who knows how Lance's career would have played out if he had gone to the Knicks. Perhaps he wouldn't have been able to focus on basketball with his family and friends surrounding him. Perhaps he would have thrived under the bright lights of New York, the city he had grown up in and had dominated high school in, and earned the tantalizing nickname of Born Ready. But it was not to be, and instead Lance would head to Indiana, to grow under the tutelage of Larry Bird, an all-time great who had taken a special interest in the career of his latest draft pick. Donnie Walsh, the president of the Pacers after Bird, noted that Larry had taken a special interest in Lance, saying that Larry just liked him as a player. He understood what he had heard about him, so I think he took the attitude when he first came here of, "You're not going to play, you're going to learn how to play, you better not get into any trouble." There was a lot of attention by Larry on the off-court stuff. This is how you act as a pro, and I think that the kid listened for the most part. From what I heard, it was rough in the first year, but we had good guys on the team, so they got involved and helped him. And the advice of Bird was probably necessary for Stephenson, who would spend the first 2 years of his NBA career largely on the bench. He was stuck behind other guards and wings in Danny Granger and Paul George, but instead of sulking, he studied and learned through watching his teammates and texting Larry Bird. Despite Larry's brief departure from the Pacers due to health, he would still text Lance updates and tips, and how to guard his upcoming matchup. And after 2 years in the NBA, Lance had learned a lot, and the perfect opportunity presented itself as Danny Granger went down with an injury. The Pacers slid Paul George to the small forward position and inserted Lance into the starting lineup at shooting guard to replace the injured Granger. Stephenson thrived and stated that he never wanted to come off the bench ever again. And when Lance thrived, so did the Pacers, with head coach Frank Vogel stating that he realised that when Lance played poorly, so did his Pacers. Stephenson had become the barometer of the Indiana Pacers. He was doing this with his New York-style aggression on both ends of the court. On defense, he was pressing up on players, getting his hand in their passing lanes, and ripping the ball straight out of opposition point guards' hands. And then on offense, he was a bullish second option to drive and distribute the ball. Lance would combine a series of crossover moves before driving hard into the paint and collapsing the defense. And when he was at his best, this would result in a pass out for an open shot or an insane finish at the rim. But perhaps the biggest improvement was his three-point shooting, as Lance jumped from someone who could not shoot it at all to a 33 to 35% three-point shooter in his third and fourth seasons with the Pacers. But it would be in his fourth season with Indiana that Lance would become a sensation around the NBA. He started every single game, averaged 14 points, 7 rebounds, and almost 5 assists a game to go along with extremely solid defense as he helped lead the Pacers to the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. And then Lance would step up and deliver in the playoffs, averaging similar stats and stepping up in big games, including Game 7 of the Atlanta series and the closeout game of the Wizards series. And Lance would play well as the Pacers lost to Lebron James and the Miami Heat in 6 games in the Eastern Conference Finals. But he would draw major controversy with his on-field antics. He drew criticism from both the press and the Pacers president and friend, Larry Bird, for his extreme trash talk, which culminated in Lance blowing LeBron James's ear. This incident seemed to bring back all of the issues of Lance being a locker room problem, bad character, and came at the exact moment before his unrestricted free agency was coming up. And it definitely affected the market for him. Lance had been a borderline all-star and one of the best two-way players on a team that had just missed out on going to the NBA Finals. But Larry Bird wanted to bring him back and offered Lance a 5-year, $44 million deal to come back to the Pacers. And in the biggest mistake of Stephenson's life, he would reject the deal and test the open market, before eventually setting on a 3-year, $27 million deal with the Charlotte Hornets. Born ready bet on himself, and it cost him. Lance would spend just one lackluster year with the Hornets before bouncing between the Clippers, Memphis Grizzlies, New York Pelicans, and Minnesota Timberwolves. 4 teams in the span of just 2 years, and he only really managed to contribute to the Grizzlies in any significant way. Many thought Lance was done after the Timberwolves chose not to sign him for the rest of the season at the end of last year. But Larry and the Pacers saw the opportunity to bring Lance back, and signed Lance to a 3-year, $12 million deal. This was a risky move, as Lance hadn't played consistently good basketball in a long time, but would allow them to capitalise if he played up to his past standards, and they would have a solid NBA player on a cheap deal to bring off the bench. And it has paid off in a big way. Born Ready was born again upon his arrival back to Indiana. In his first 6 games there, he would help them qualify for the playoffs, and then earn 27 minutes a game in the actual playoff series against Cleveland. In this series, he scored 16 points, grabbed 5 rebounds, and dished 3 assists a game, as he reminded the league and LeBron of his talent, grit, and effort. And this season, Lance has continued that, becoming an exceptionally important bench piece to the surprisingly good Indiana Pacers. In just 24 minutes a game off the bench, he is averaging 9 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 assists a game as he helps handle the ball and run the offense for the bench unit. It seems that Indiana is the place to be for Lance, and the more time that has gone on this season, the better he has gotten. As a result of this improved play, the play of Oladipo, Sabonis, all of their veterans, and Miles Turner, the Pacers are a lot better than expected and look set to make the playoffs once again. A huge improvement from what many thought would be a down season for the Pacers after the departure of Paul George. And if they make the playoffs once again, they could come up against LeBron James once more, and we'll be able to see if Lance has finally matured enough to just get down and play basketball. An attempt to take a few games off the player that has thwarted him and the Pacers countless times in the playoffs before. But after this season, Lance has only 1 more year left on his deal. And going beyond that, I hope that he sticks with the Pacers, as it seems to be the only place in the NBA that he has been able to thrive so far. But wherever he plays, I hope that he continues to bring that New York street ball style to the NBA, with the fancy crossovers, the over-dribbling, and the herky-jerky movement as he flails his way to the rim. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more NBA videos in the future. And leave a comment of what you think of Lance Stephenson and the Indiana Pacers below.